welcome to Whispers of Ink. I'm Machado de Assis, and now, I will read one of my stories.
Let's start with the book The Story of a Tear, which is part of my novels collection. Chapter 1. Now, who was this man? Science might have explained the nature of tears, but poets would call them the soul's dew, the heart's own language. A single drop, small and light, shed for some physical or emotional reason, hardly anything at all, and yet everything. To the practical mind, it was a sign of weakness. To the tender heart, it was sacred, a reason to feel sympathy. Alexandre Dumas once compared the great flood to a tear from God, a tear of sorrow, if sorrow could even belong to the divinia tear that human wickedness had forced from the eyes of the Creator. But the tear I'm telling you about here was not nearly that big. It was just one simple drop, falling from human eyes, in a moment of deep sorrow and despair. Anyone who has ever wept will understand its meaning. I once met a man 30 years old who seemed, somehow, much older, like a man of 60. He was tall, and had that kind of serious beauty that only great and noble suffering can carve into a face. His hair was completely white, hanging loosely behind without care or pretense. His eyes were sunken, his skin pale, his body thin and slightly bent. He lived alone in a quiet house somewhere in Katambi, a place he had chosen himself so that his friends wouldn't have far to carry him when the time came. He rarely left home, read a little sometimes, and thought deeply most of the time. When he did go out, it was usually to the cemetery, where he would stay for about 2 hours. When people asked where he had been, he would say with a quiet smile that he had gone to look for a new house. Some neighbors thought he was mad. Others just called him strange. One nosy fellow who lived a few steps away even considered reporting him to the police, but a few people talked him out of it before he could do anything foolish. He lived a quiet life, though not a peaceful one. The boys in the neighborhood had given him a nickname, and they followed him around so much that he finally decided to stay indoors as much as possible. His name was Daniel, and with a dry kind of humor, he used to say he was living in the lion's den, saved from being eaten alive only by some divine miracle. Those lions, they were the other people. I don't know why, but the moment I saw him, I felt drawn to him. I had gone one afternoon to visit a family in Katambi, and they told me about this strange old man. I became curious. When he passed by on the street, everyone rushed to the window like he was some kind of wild animal. Right then, I could see he was broken inside, a man who carried the weight of some great pain, barely holding on to life. I decided I had to speak with him. I told the ladies around me what I planned to do. They all laughed. But then I said something that silenced the room. What if that man suffers because of a woman? The women stopped laughing. The men looked at each other, unsure what to say. 8 days later, I knocked on Daniel's door. A tired old black man had answered and asked what I wanted. When I said I wanted to speak to the owner of the house, he told me Daniel had gone for a walk. But I knew where that walk led. I went straight to the cemetery. As I entered one of the narrow paths among the graves, I saw Daniel far ahead, sitting alone on a stone near a tomb, his head buried in his hands. The sight made me stop. It was clear his strange behavior, his isolation, Everything he was tied to this place, to this grave. I walked slowly toward him, stopping a few steps away. I stood near another tomb, so he wouldn't think I was there just out of curiosity. From time to time I lifted my eyes to look at him. He hadn't moved an inch. Still bent over, still holding his head like it was too heavy to lift. I waited for about an hour, hoping he would get up, but when I finally gave up on that idea, I started to leave. That's when I saw, coming from a distance, a funeral procession heading in that direction. Another soul had come to claim his final resting place in the vast city of the dead. The sound of footsteps from the last few friends and acquaintances of this new tenant woke up the old man, who stood up quickly, looked toward the grave, and began walking toward the gate. I wanted to check if the tomb near where the old man had been sitting had a name carved on it, but I was also afraid of losing sight of him. He was walking fast. Still, I picked up my pace and managed to read, just in time, the simple words engraved on the stone. Here lies a martyr. Then, speeding up even more, I caught up with the old man just as he reached the gate. I wanted to talk to him, but I hesitated. What could I possibly say? How could I explain my curiosity? Meanwhile, he kept walking, and I followed closely behind, until we both reached the door of a small house. "Did you need something?" "A little water, please." "Come in." We stepped inside. "Joao," he called out to the black servant who opened the door. "Bring a glass of water for this gentleman." "Please, have a seat." I didn't know what to say after asking for the water. As soon as he saw me seated, the old man took a chair and sat by the window. The last rays of the setting sun hid his gray, tired face, marked by years of suffering. He looked both humble and dignified, a deeply respectful sight. The water came, I drank it, and then I spoke to the man of the house. "Thank you," I said. "Impe and I live." "It's not necessary," Daniel interrupted gently. "My world is no longer of this one." "But why do you say that?" I asked. He frowned and answered shortly. "Because it just isn't." It was impossible to get another word from him after that. I left, but with the firm idea of coming back, to try again and get to know him better. And so, 5 days later, I returned to Katumbi and knocked once more on Daniel's door. I found the old man holding a book. He asked me what I wanted, and when I told him I was the same person who had visited 5 days earlier, he said he remembered and invited me to sit down. "Do you want some water again?" he said, smiling sadly. "No, I don't want water," I replied. "I think you must have understood by now that what I wanted that afternoon wasn't just a glass of water. I wanted and still want to get to know you, because I believe you're a good man." "Good?" "No," the old man answered. "And I must seem like a strange mystery to you." "Maybe so." "You want to solve this mystery, right?" "I want to respect you, and I believe that to respect you, I only need to know you. I understand my curiosity might seem unusual, but please forgive me and believe that I don't mock your oddities or make ridiculous guesses about your solitude. On the contrary, I think your isolation comes from some noble and holy reason." The old man thought for a few minutes before answering. "From all this, I conclude that you are more curious than most people. Others are satisfied with guessing the events of my life, but you come directly to ask me about them. Pardon me if I've overstepped. But what redeems you is that I feel you are good. I sense this isn't just curiosity. It's a strong desire from the heart. And a heart like yours is rare. That's exactly right. Then, sir, said the old man, I am ready to give you as many glasses of water as you ask for, but don't go beyond the glasses of water. To question my life is like questioning a tombs. Do not speak. But that doesn't stop you from going to question the tomb of that martyr. The old man stood up and gave me a serious, piercing look. Why do you say that? You know very well that I wept and still weep for her. And am not to blame. I know nothing, I replied. Daniel stayed in that position for a moment. Then he sat down again and fixed his eyes on the book. I didn't dare to break the silence. After a while, Daniel lifted his head and asked me, "Did you see me there?" I did. Please, don't tell your friends. I know it's a public place and anyone can see me, but not everyone can understand me the way you do. Will you be my friend? That's all I can offer you. As he said this, he stretched out his hand. I shook it, deeply moved. We talked a bit more after that, but I couldn't get anything out of the mysterious old man. I went back many times, and each time, Daniel became more open and trusting. Still, every time I tried to ask something too personal, he would frown and fall silent. One day, he fell ill. Since he had no one else to care for him except the old black servant, and since I had already gained his trust, I felt I should stay with him for a while. I took care of him like he was a friend I had known for 20 years. He watched my devotion and seemed truly touched. With time and care, Daniel slowly got better and entered the recovery phase. The doctor who treated him was also a good friend of mine. When Daniel, near the end of his illness, asked how much he owed, the doctor smiled and said, "Just a handshake." Daniel shook his hand and smiled at me. One afternoon, as Daniel was getting better, we sat by the window watching the sun go down. I talked to keep him distracted while he stared into the distance, lost in thought. After a long silence, he finally said, "Pedro, you've shown me great affection, and I honestly don't know how to repay you unless by giving you the greatest proof of trust." Me? Yes, you. What I've refused to tell you for so long, the secret of my life, the painful memory of a past that is gone. I will now place all of it in your mind and heart. Am truly grateful for this trust. Especially because I can't be far from death, and if I waited longer, you might never hear it. Joao, go get the ebony urn. The old man took a small ebony urn from around his neck using a silver key, then handed it to me. This, he said solemnly, holding up a folded piece of paper, contains my entire life story. In such a tiny space, I asked, surprised. Yes, he replied. And there's even paper left over. What I mean is, the summary I speak of takes up only a small part of this page. He unfolded the paper and held it up for me to see, though he didn't let me touch it. It was half a sheet of thick paper, with 4 short stanzas neatly written in the center. So, I said, is it the space these verses occupy? No, he said, pointing to a small, nearly invisible mark. It's the space this tear takes up. Can't you see it? I looked closely, puzzled. I don't see anything. Are you surprised? He asked. Come closer to the light. Don't you see this faint mark here? I looked again, but still saw nothing. Was the old man mad? It's natural you don't see it, he said. The trace of the tear has long vanished. But my eyes, which have watched it since the beginning, still see it as clearly as ever. My entire life, he said slowly, is the story of this one tear. Ah, I said. Do you mean to tell me this story? Yes, he replied. I will. The old man began. I was 28 years old when my father sent me from Pernambuco, where I was born and raised, to Rio de Janeiro, so I could begin a career in business. My father had some wealth, but he believed rightly so that his sons must also build their own fortunes. I arrived with a letter of recommendation to a merchant named Valadares, an old friend of my father's. They hadn't seen each other in 20 years. Still, I was warmly welcomed and immediately placed in Valadares' wholesale fabric shop. But I was no ordinary clerk. My employer treated me with great care. I dined at his home every evening in Laranjeiras, and was always invited to every ball and family gathering. Valadares had 2 children, a son and a daughter. The boy was named Alfredo, a spoiled brat of the worst kind. He wasted his father's money on parties and late-night outings. His father had even considered locking him up at home, giving him only bread and water, hoping that such a strict life might cure his wasteful habits. The daughter was named Elisa. Where Alfredo gave reason for complaints, Elisa gave reason for praise. She was beautiful and gentle, modest and kind. Her face and heart seemed to belong to an angel. Their father raised them both with great care. When he spoke of Elisa, he often said she was like good soil where seeds grow strong and full. Alfredo, on the other hand, was like dry land, where nothing could take root. When Valadares said this, Alfredo would smile foolishly. But Elisa would kiss her father and gently whisper some advice to her brother. Raised with strictness, Elisa did not understand the idea of flirtation. She knew how to behave with grace and respect. She was polite in society, yet always modest. No one could find fault in her, not in what she did, nor in what she didn't do. Few people visited their home. Among the regular guests were a major in the infantry, a young clerk, a poet, and me. The poet was a young man named Luis, the son of one of Valadares' old friends, who had died not long before. We would often meet at the house, except for Alfredo, who came home around 4 in the morning and didn't wake up until noon. During these gatherings we played piano, sang, talked, and drank tea. The major played chess with Valadares. The poet recited his verses. But it was Elisa who brought life to everything, with her charm and sweet words. Maybe it was habit, or maybe it was fate, but I began to feel something special for the merchant's daughter. I was a young man from the countryside, used to a quiet and simple life. I liked those habits, that way of living. Besides, I was good-looking and had a kind heart. My feelings for her grew slowly, until they became a deep and real love. But would she feel the same? It seemed so. When she sometimes looked at me with those big eyes of hers, I felt a fire inside my soul, and I believed that look was proof of true affection. To spend my life with her was my first and greatest dream. But how could I make that happen? Asking her father was the natural choice, but I hated the idea. After all, I was only a simple clerk, trusted enough to be welcomed into their home, but I feared people might think my intentions were not honest or pure. That's when my heart and conscience began their hardest battle between duty and love. I believed it was the right thing to stay silent, but that silence was the cruelest punishment for me. Days passed like this, and though I could not yet hope to call Elisa mine, I at least had the happiness of seeing her and living through her eyes. This went on for 7 months. Resigned to suffer in silence, I decided at the same time to work hard, to build a future that would make me worthy of her hand. I also noticed that Valadares, who had always been my declared friend, was showing me even more care and attention than before. In my dreams of happiness, I imagined that the merchant had noticed my feelings and was secretly happy about them, perhaps even at his daughter's suggestion. One day, it was October 185, I was working in the office when I received a message from Valadares asking me to come to his house that evening. I went. Valadares was in his private study and told me to come in. Valadares asked with a calm voice, "Did you receive my message on time?" "I did, sir," I answered. "Good. Sit down." I pulled up a chair. Valadares cleaned his glasses, and after a short silence he asked me, "You don't suspect why I called you here, do you?" "I do not, sir." "That's natural." I was sitting there, trying to stay calm, but my heart was pounding. Old people are usually smarter than the young. I guess that's why he looked at me like that before asking the question. "Tell me," he said, "have you ever thought about getting married?" I looked up at him, surprised. There was joy in my eyes, I'm sure of that. But there was also fear. Kind of fear that creeps in when you're about to get something you've wanted for so long. "I don't know," I said. "You don't know?" he replied. "You sound like a young lady." Maybe my question was too forward. Let me ask another. Do you love someone? I stayed quiet for a moment. Then I said, "Yes." He leaned forward. "You love my daughter, don't you?" I took a breath. "Yes, I do." He smiled a little. "What are you sorry for? You're both young. You can love each other. Are you loved in return?" "I don't know." "Oh," he said, "but I think you are." "She didn't tell you that?" "No," he said, "but I can tell." If that were true. "It is true," he said firmly. "So if you love her and you want to marry her, forget about silly fears. I'm not some monster guarding a castle. You just have to ask." "But how can I even dream of such happiness?" "By dreaming," he said with a laugh. "I'll go talk to Elisa." "Please do. Go to the living room and wait." I left, half in joy, half in fear. What if she didn't feel the same? What if this was all in my head and even in his? But then I thought, how could we both be wrong? Maybe, just maybe, this was real. And so, with hope in my chest, I waited for the answer that would change everything. About 15 minutes later, Valadares walked into the room. He had a smile on his face, the kind that tells you your life just got better. I stood up and walked toward him. "My daughter is yours," he said simply. Then Elisa came in, right behind her father. "Oh, what happiness," I said, moving toward her. She looked down shyly. I reached for her hand, and she gave it to me without a word. It was night outside, but inside, everything felt like morning. That much joy was almost too much to take. I needed air. I even wanted to step outside, to see if everything would vanish like a dream or if it was really happening. The wedding was set for 1 month later. Valadez told me I would become a partner in his business. That, he said, would be the start of the fortune my father always wanted me to build for myself. I met Elisa at a small gathering at her family's home, and from the moment I saw her, I knew she was someone special. She was quiet, thoughtful, and kind in a way that made you want to be better just by being near her. When I asked her to marry me, I believe she accepted out of love, truly believed it. Looking back, though, I realized she didn't act any differently toward me after saying yes. She had always been gentle and warm, so no one noticed that she remained exactly the same, even as our wedding day approached. The only real change I noticed was in Louis, the poet who often visited her home. He used to be cheerful and full of life, but after my proposal, he grew quiet and distant. I began to suspect he was in love with Elisa too. Perhaps he had hoped to marry her himself one day. Fate, however, had other plans. And I told myself, not without a touch of pride, that I had done nothing wrong. Anyone could fall for her, all it took was knowing her. Our wedding took place in November. It was the happiest day of my life, though I couldn't ignore a small sadness. From the morning on, Elisa seemed troubled. I asked her what was wrong, and she said she wasn't feeling quite well. Should we delay the wedding? I asked. No, she replied. It's only a headache. Nothing serious. And so, we were married. All of Elisa's friends and family came to celebrate, except for Louis, who had left the city 2 days earlier to visit a relative in the countryside. When the ceremony ended, and I stood there as her husband, I felt a joy so great it frightened me. I thanked my father silently for sending me to Rio de Janeiro, where I had found such happiness. I won't describe every detail of our first days together. They were what one might expect: sweet, tender, and filled with the excitement of a new beginning. Elisa remained just as she had always been, kind, reserved, and gentle. While I felt a deep passion and joy in having her by my side, she seemed more obedient than joyful, more passive than loving. I told myself it was just her nature. She was raised this way, I thought. Still, I did everything I could to make her happy, with care, with attention, with love. She would often smile at me, a quiet, soft smile that felt like a ray of light from heaven. And for me, that smile was enough. A few months later, the poet showed up again at court. He said he had just closed the eyes of a dying relative and wore deep black clothes to prove it. The mourning suited him, not just the color of his suit, but his face, which looked dark and sad like a grave hiding a secret. He came by our house once, but Elisa refused to see him. She sent word that she wasn't feeling well. The young man returned twice more, but never got to speak with my wife. After that, he stopped coming. Soon I heard he had left for the United States. He told Major Valadez, who often visited our home, that he needed a big, crowded city to feel like a desert for his heart. It wasn't hard to guess that his love for Elisa hadn't died. And rather than betray her or lose his honor, he chose to disappear and bury his pain in a self-imposed exile. 3 years passed. Then, Eliza fell ill. At first it seemed like nothing serious, but her condition got worse with time. One day, the doctor told me in private that she had consumption. Can you imagine how I felt? "Save her, doctor," I cried. "Yes, I will save her." And he truly tried everything. He kept the illness a secret from Eliza, thinking it was best, but she already knew. She could feel it in her bones. She grew thinner and paler every day. I gave up my business duties to my father-in-law. He in turn handed them over to the bookkeeper. From that point on, both of us focused only on taking care of poor Eliza. But the disease was stronger than any of us. Science and love had no power against it. Eliza was fading away, and death was getting closer. Still, we could say we did everything we could. I rarely left the house, and when I did, I didn't stay away for long. One afternoon as I returned home, I couldn't find Eliza in the sitting room. She hadn't been getting up much lately, so I thought she was resting in bed. I went to check her room. She wasn't there. They told me she had gone into her private study. I walked toward her on tiptoe. Eliza had her back turned, sitting in an armchair with a piece of paper in her hand. I moved closer, slowly and quietly, hoping to surprise her with a kiss. But just as I got near, I saw that the paper she held was a poem. She paused to read it, and then I saw a tear fall onto the page. What was this? In one instant, I understood everything. I could not stop myself from letting out a small cry, and she heard it. She turned, startled. When she saw me standing there pale and silent, the girl rose with difficulty. Bowing her head, she whispered, "Forgive me." She tried to kneel, but I stopped her. Eliza did not seem upset. Her eyes still held the calm of someone innocent. But the fire burning inside them was already the fire of death. The shock I had caused her sped up what could not be stopped. She fell into my arms. I carried her to her bed. By nightfall, she had passed away. Can you imagine what I felt that terrible night? Twice I brought her pain, once in life and once in death. The poem she read was from Louis, the man she truly loved. They could never marry because she knew my marriage pleased her father. I had become the curse of her life. And even in death I played a part, for I had hastened her end. Perhaps she might have lived a few more days, perhaps not long for her, but long enough for my love. My grief over losing her was drowned by guilt. I had unknowingly caused her death, a death so calm and quiet, without a single complaint or accusation. She lived by my side for 3 years, without ever speaking a word of pain. She obeyed every wish of mine, playing the role of a martyr that fate had given her. Now you understand why that grave near me is hers. That is where I go to ask for her forgiveness, with prayers and tears, because I need it so much. All of this sorrow, all of this pain, is the story of this one tear. After she died, I withdrew from the world. I looked for peace in solitude. Some people think I am mad. Others call me strange. But they do not know the story of this tear. I'm just a victim now. But I used to be a villain unconsciously, yes. but still a cruel one. I heard a soul that could have been happy here on earth, but wasn't. One day, I was at the cemetery when I saw a man dressed in black, walking toward the same grave. It was Luis. He saw me crying and understood that I had loved the woman who died for him. At that grave, our old rivalry ended in a solemn peace. We shook hands, then each walked away, never to meet again. Luis killed himself. Unable to find peace in life, he searched for it in death. Now he lies beside her in heaven. That's why I won't disturb their happiness. The old man lowered his head and fell into thought. I left. Even today, if you visit the Katumba cemetery 1 or 2 times a week, you will likely find Daniel praying by a grave. Time has erased the letters on the stone, but not from his memory. That grave holds his soul.
Thank you for listening so far. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like our channel and click the bell to be notified whenever a new book is read. Have you heard of Machado de Assis? Machado de Assis, born in Rio de Janeiro in 1839, is considered one of the greatest writers in Brazilian literature and a master of psychological realism. He was a novelist, poet, playwright, and short story writer whose works explore the complexities of human behavior with irony, subtlety, and deep introspection. Among his most famous novels are Dom Casmurro, which questions truth and memory, and the posthumous memoirs of Brás Cubas, a satirical narrative told by a deceased man. Machado's literature often reflects the contradictions of Brazilian society, addressing issues like race, class, power, and identity in a sophisticated yet accessible style. Despite being born into poverty and facing racial prejudice, Machado de Assis rose to become the president of the Brazilian Academy of Letters and a symbol of literary excellence. His sharp wit and profound observations about society and the human soul make his works timeless and universally relevant. Today, he is recognized not only as a Brazilian icon, but also as a world-class author whose legacy continues to influence generations of writers and thinkers. Machado de Assis shows us that literature can be both elegant and critical, intimate and universal, humorous and profound. His stories remain as powerful and thought-provoking today as they were more than a century ago. Machado is a treasure of world literature, and through his voice, we discover the infinite layers of the human experience.